Okay, well, I'm Mac McClellan, President and CEO of the Luxury Marketing Council Middle East, President and CEO of Center House Limited, a management consulting firm that focuses on government relations, marketing, and business development for brands, luxury and otherwise. But the Luxury Marketing Council in the Middle East is headquartered in Dubai. We, as the Luxury Marketing Council is globally, we're the professional association of the brands that market products and services to high net worth individuals. And so we get them into events where they can meet each other, learn how to collaborate, cooperate, share best practices, and really to be the thought leader for the community in luxury marketing. So it's the intention, of course, is to take the Luxury Marketing Council throughout the Middle East, easily into 10 luxury capitals in the Arab world, North Africa, Levant, the Gulf countries, and then maybe some of the peripheral states, if and when they're either stable enough or the opportunity to do business there is available to us. Okay. My consulting firm, Center House, stands almost, I guess the analogy is, we're your training wheels for brands that are either coming to the Middle East for the first time or expanding into a new market or a new product where they need help in, as I said before, government relations, marketing, and business development. The point is that these brands generally don't have in-depth knowledge of the Middle East. The Americans who are part of the team for promotion and other purposes come for a couple of years and then leave, and there's nobody with that institutional knowledge to help guide them, and that's what we do, right? So some of our clients include defense contractors, energy companies. ConocoPhillips was a client for a long time. Law firms, American law firms, and everything from the big multinationals down to the $5 million a year environmental consulting firm, a little firm out of Columbia, Maryland, that found us and asked us to help. We helped them win projects for the Dubai municipality and in Saudi Arabia and other places.
Welcome to Conversations with Leaders in Luxury. I'm Greg Furman, founder and chairman of the Luxury Marketing Council. Since 1994, 1,000 luxury brands in more than 50 cities worldwide, some 5,000 CEOs and CMOs. Thank you for the investment of your time in the luxury of your company. Today I'm with a friend and business partner who I've known for the last 10 years, Mac McClellan. Mac is the founder of the Luxury Marketing Council, president and CEO of the Luxury Marketing Council in Dubai and Abu Dhabi now, but has the license for all of the Arab Emirates and Middle East. Mac, it's always great to see you. I don't get to see you enough.
I know, it's great to be here, Greg.
Thank you for being here. It was a great breakfast.
Sure.
We're looking forward to a good Inner Circle CEO Salon luncheon, so appreciate your time and always enjoy spending some time with you.
It's always fun to come.
Credentialize yourself, Matt. Talk a little bit about your background and history from a business standpoint and what led you to Dubai, where is your home, and then talk about the council, but kind of take us through your roots and by way of introduction to our viewers.
Okay, well, my father worked in the oil industry, and so we ended up in Libya in the late 60s and early 70s, and I just developed a fondness for the Middle East and have been there ever since.
You speak a number of Arabic languages.
Well, I speak Arabic, yes.
Okay.
German, French, Spanish, Arabic, and I'm learning Tagalog because there's so many Filipinos in Dubai, so it's fun.
Yeah.
But so grew up in Libya, went back to the States long enough to finish high school and college, and then overseas in the Marine Corps.
Originally a New Orleans kid?
From just outside of New Orleans, yeah. And that's where my dad happened to be working in the oil field when I was born. So, then 14 of 20 years in the Marine Corps was in the Middle East during the period including Desert Shield, Desert Storm in 1990-91.
And so we were talking last night over dinner, some serious activity there.
There was, yeah. 500,000 of my closest friends were there, and we stayed for the better part of a year.
And experienced some engagements.
Exactly, yeah. Met some new friends. But and then retired from the Marine Corps and have been in Dubai ever since, working with a couple of corporations, and then opened up my own consulting firm. And through that, met you through a mutual friend.
Yes, yeah.
And we've decided to work together on the Luxury Marketing
And
Council.
was your last corporate experience the Enron experience before you
was.
went out on your own? Maybe
Yes.
a soundbite or two on that one, because I think it's fascinating, because we share the oil business in common. As you know, I ran public affairs for Suncor in Canada, who were the pioneer developers of the Athabasca tar sands. And when we first met, that was kind of an interesting dialogue.
Well, Enron is one of the energy majors, did not have a physical presence in the Middle East other than projects that they developed for their clients. And so they asked if I would open and run Enron Middle East. And so I did that as the general manager.
And it was, I mean, the scale of that organization then, as you were saying at breakfast, was
Billions in annual revenue.
and I think you said
it was
170 million in profit.
Yeah, and that was only growing because the Middle East was going to be assuming responsibility for global LNG and many other things. So,
And with a very lean staff as well.
just a couple of dozen people.
Right, astonishing. Huh?
Yeah. And I say the problem happened when my boss from Houston moved to Dubai, and right after that, the company fell apart. So he should have stayed in Houston. So.
Well, it opened the door to a number of other things, one of which was your interest in the health and insurance arena.
Yeah, and with a core team of Americans, a man who was the former president, CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and a doctor from Johns Hopkins, and all, we helped to create and set up and take it to IPO, the first purely private health insurance company in the United Arab Emirates. There's a government health insurance company, but this was the only, and there are several general insurers, but it's the only one that deals specifically with health insurance.
Yeah, and I remember when you so generously hosted my tour of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, which was one of the great business experiences of my career, that it was kind of a sparkle in the eye then.
It was.
Just information, and since it has matured and you've emerged from that.
Right. Well, the government figured out that they couldn't manage healthcare.
Why am I surprised?
and decided instead to mandate health insurance. And so the companies provide that. And so it was in that sweet spot there to then provide a health portfolio that wasn't available before.
And it was in that window, it's 8 years ago, I think, that when we met, that you launched 07?
It was 07, yeah.
Launched the Luxury Marketing Council.
Getting the trade license to operate it was difficult.
I remember.
Because
it was almost 2 years, wasn't it?
Oh, a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it didn't fit into the standard box that they had.
Yeah.
And so, for licensing, and so it took a while. And even then we had to stop activities for a little bit as they changed the license.
Yeah, I remember that well. And you have to have an Emirati as part of the business as a
local partner
mandated by government.
The commercial law mandates a local partner.
And how has the council grown? And we've had a couple of, in 07, we kind of was a strange window as we moved in internationally to 08 and experienced the global crisis. Luxury being maybe not hit the way mass was, but hit nonetheless.
It was. When we first launched, members were signing up very quickly. You remember we had several that were, and multi-brands bounced up to about 50 members in no time at all. Yeah. And then 08, 09, it came crashing down as those brands lost their marketing budgets. Uniquely in the Middle East, a local partner owns the license or the branding opportunity, and so
for a number often of luxury brands.
Correct. Yeah, the big powerhouses there will have 200, 300 luxury brands.
Right.
But two marketing people for those brands, they implement what the brand headquarters in Europe, the U.S. says to do.
Right.
And so it's it's different than what we're used to here.
Yeah, very different, because here the beauty is each of the CEOs and or CMOs engage, and pretty much, certainly for North America, have the decision-making capability to engage, to invest in the membership, whereas there you go through a middleman, I assume, which is a little bit of a different sell.
It is.
From the standpoint of inspiring individual brands to join.
Yeah, the big powerhouses will want one membership, and then bring 200 brands.
Right.
And that, I mean,
The economics of it are,
well, it's not so much the economics. It's just, you know, as you know, we want 200 rear ends and seats, not more.
yes, right.
So
Right.
that's the point.
Right.
Get the best and brightest in there to figure out how to work.
So the people that are your members, are they the heads of marketing of the brands, the general managers? Who are your constituents within the council there?
So for instance, Emirates NBD is a member. A few years ago, Emirates Bank and National Bank of Dubai merged into Emirates NBD. The member is the head of marketing
Okay.
and 3 or 4 of his team.
Yes.
Because the general management hasn't quite figured out how the luxury marketing
Yeah.
council.
Well,
can help them.
we're the same here. I mean, we have the top 3 or 5 people: CMO, CEO, chief technology officer, and maybe the EVP level as well.
But for the most part, it's the managing director or general manager of the brand,
Okay.
the head of marketing, and then a couple of other people.
So coming out of the doldrums of that 07-08 window, maybe you could talk a little bit about where you are now with the council and some of your visions for it going forward.
So toward the end of 2012, we had a lot of interest expressed and gained a couple of members that said they would host, you know, as often and as many things as we wanted them to host. And so we're taking advantage of that. In 2013, our real, you know, coming out year, we did 19 events, 6 purely social, and the other 13 were the monthly meetings and the breakfast briefings.
Yeah, we find that to be a nice balance too. Chris, who is my CMO, has always said to me we should do more social events. So we've tried to do strictly social, seasonally, which is a different form of meeting than just presentation or panel, but the two work nicely together.
It does, and it was the members who asked for the social events.
Yeah.
I was like, let's keep it to business,
Yes.
and they said no, we want to get together occasionally just to meet.
Yeah, we found I was of a similar mindset, and I think people basically said, "Hey, Greg, loosen up. We need time to really get to know people, not in the first 40 minutes of a cocktail reception prior to a content event, but let's have an evening together and really allow for some real communication and partying a little bit."
Well, we do a couple of things there that we've tried, and they're successful. First of all, every meeting we'll do speed dating. You know, where I tell them, take out 2 business cards, meet somebody who you have not met yet.
Right.
Trade the cards.
So you enforce that.
Yes. And you've got 30 seconds to introduce yourself, and they introduce themselves, and then 30 seconds to figure out how you might work together.
Right.
And then when I blow the whistle, you change and find somebody else. So you do that twice.
Yeah.
And the newcomers are always uncomfortable.
Right.
And then the next time they're like, yeah,
Like,
I want to.
It's like a beehive.
Yeah. And so, you know, it forces that cross-pollination, you know. We also launched our first country focus and invited the U.S. ambassador to the UAE and a half dozen
based in
U.S.
Dubai.
brands, correct, half dozen U.S. brands to sit on a panel and talk about the challenges and opportunities for U.S. brands
Entering.
in, you know, in Dubai, in the UAE, in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And so we had Boeing and Sparkling Sky, which is a very small company that has the license in the region for In-Rooms Plus, which is bespoke minibar setups on the food side, not the drink side.
Kind of gourmet.
Yeah.
Right.
And we had the Ritz-Carlton, Dubai International Financial Center. We had, you know, good brands like that to say, you know, in hospitality, F&B, products and services, you know, services. Here are the things that work. Here are the things that don't work. Here are things we have to do differently in the Middle East because of the local culture, local laws, etc. The other thing that we launched, and by the way, we're going to be doing country focus on Italy sometime at the end of this year or beginning of 2015. I figure we'll do 2 a year.
Terrific.
Yeah. And then the other thing is inside the C-suite. Now, inside the C-suite, you know, we're good about getting CEOs and managing directors to come to us in a restaurant somewhere for an event, but instead we turn it around and we go to them.
So they host for you.
They did.
And how an intimate group, I assume.
Well,
relatively.
Dubai Duty Free was our first one. Yeah. We had 54 people.
Okay, so this is a serious program.
And yes,
it's not like a dozen people. It's, you know, and do they host the speaker company host for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, the Dubai Duty Free, the one of the original team that started Dubai Duty Free in 1986, I think it was there. Colin McLaughlin, who's now the vice chairman, and I mean he's been there through the whole process after coming out of Shannon Airport Duty Free, and he told us about the first day of operation and the first day that they, or the first month that they did $1 million in sales, and the first time that they did the first week of $1 million sales, and then the first day. And he said, now, if we only do $1 million in a shift, something's wrong.
And as you were saying, it's a 1.8 billion a year business.
Yes. That was last year. I'm sure this year it will be a lot more.
Right.
And by 2020, they expect to be doing over $5 billion in business annually.
How is the climate or the attitude from the business side, from the marketers, your members who are marketing people or GMs? How are you seeing their understanding of the luxury market and marketing itself changing since you've started the council?
Well, the initial reaction would be they're marketing to the locals, but they're not really. The Emiratis, the local Arabs, tend to go abroad when they do their shopping. So the challenge is within the culture of the Middle East to attract the expatriate shopper from around the world. I mean, Dubai has a couple hundred nationalities that live there, and then an equal number of nationalities that travel to or through Dubai. I mean, Dubai Airport is 150 million travelers a year, something like that. It's huge. And so they're marketing to different constituencies separate from the people who actually live there, local or expatriate.
It kind of makes Manhattan's incoming tourism challenge shrink compared to what the diversity of Dubai has.
Well, yeah, because Dubai is a service economy.
Yeah.
It's hotels and restaurants and beaches and shopping malls and all. There's no heavy industry. Abu Dhabi has oil and gas, compared to Dubai. But beyond that, it's a service industry. And so people come in from around the world to work there. That encourages travelers because they know there's somebody there who speaks their language, understands the culture, etc.
Are the marketers of the brands more inclined to look favorably upon partnerships and collaborations than when you started the council?
They're starting to. Yeah, again, because of those local agents, local partners that own so many brands, many of them feel they don't have to partner with somebody else. But, for instance, you have luxury real estate developer DAMAC partnering with Jaguar, Bentley, Rolls-Royce, that if you buy one of their properties, you get the car free. So, they're figuring out that that's an attractive offer that they can make with brands that they hadn't traditionally worked with before.
So they're beginning to realize that they do in fact share many, if not most, of the same top customers.
Sure.
And see the value of collaboration.
Yeah. But one other point about the different nationalities and all, Dubai Duty Free has 600 Chinese staff now. There are signs in Dubai Airport that are in English and Chinese, but not in Arabic. Because again, they're marketing to a different consumer, and the Chinese customers who come in, the travelers who come in, have money to spend and need an outlet for that money.
Well, you were saying this morning at our breakfast that globally the Chinese are spending 110 billion worldwide, and that in Dubai, not Dubai, or maybe Dubai, was it 10 billion in Dubai alone?
Yes, 10 billion in the UAE.
Okay.
Out of about 100 billion spend, about 10% of that is in the UAE.
Yeah.
And obviously Dubai is looking at ways to bring in more of those travelers to increase that share of that $100 billion.
Yeah. How about Dubai facing the U.S.? We do a lot of work with UK Trade and Development, whose charter and mission is to do cross-the-pond ventures, so that if London entrepreneurs and brands that don't have a presence in the U.S., a lot of the time in New York, they'll bring them over, serve as an introducing broker, and the other way, if U.S. brands that don't have a presence, primarily London, but not limited to London, maybe some of the industrial areas, they will take American brands under the umbrella, if you will, of UK Trade and Development, and focus those synergies and look for and help people profit from across the pond initiatives.
Right.
Is there a similar kind of dynamic in Dubai, Abu Dhabi at this point in time?
Oh yeah, I mean the Dubai Tourism and Commerce Marketing Department has a couple of offices here in the U.S. And they're to facilitate those type of introductions and business deals and all. And then, I mean, it's something that within my consulting firm, I help primarily American companies.
So you have you work with them a little bit now, or a lot?
A little bit with DTCM, but then working with American clients that want to invest in the Middle East.
Yeah.
So for instance, when I return to Dubai, I'm going to be opening a family office for a high net worth American partner who wants to invest in the region and wants an office to do it from.
So to serve as a family office to wealthy Emirati?
No, to a wealthy American who wants to invest in the Middle East.
As a family office?
Yes, she wants a family office there to set it up on her behalf to act as the as the repository for all of the investments and all.
Talk briefly about your consulting practice, since you've mentioned it, and what the dimensions of that are, and where opportunities are for member brands or for brands that are looking to have a presence in Dubai or the Middle East.
Well, we looked at where was the gap, and so for American brands going to the Middle East, probably the three hardest things that they have to do is government relations, marketing, in all of its senses, and business development. Because I have personally lived in or worked in every Arab country, plus a lot of the peripheral states. Providing that is not a stretch. I mean, it's our core business. We act like your training wheels. Training wheels on a bicycle.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
Most consultants want you to hire them and they hang on to you forever and ever and ever. We say, give us a year or two and then we're going to push you off and you go do your own thing. So we help get them there. And so Center House Limited is that link between East and West to help companies get on their business journey going the right way.
And what kinds of companies have you worked with?
Oh, everything from the big oil and gas companies, big defense contractors, all the way down to a $5 million a year environmental consulting firm out of Maryland.
So you cast a much broader net than luxury marketing in your consulting practice, but not exclusive of luxury brands.
No. We do luxury brands also, but it's again, mostly American companies that need help getting in and getting business. That's what we do.
What's your vision for the council and expansion going forward?
Well, as the global financial crisis ends, hopefully soon, and with other things that are bubbling, like possibly sanctions being lifted in Iran and things like that, we're looking at putting chapters in about 10 of the capitals, the luxury capitals in the Middle East and North Africa, and so that would cement the Luxury Marketing Council in the Middle East and give us access to the 300 million Arabs and 80 million Persians, equal number of Turks and others, huge luxury markets that need the Luxury Marketing Council to help in those collaboration, cooperation, and best practices.
You also serve, I think, a few of the networks as an expert and commentator historically since I've known you, who routinely rely on you for trendings.
Well, I'm on CNBC pretty regularly, providing information and knowledge about American businesses overseas and what's affecting them.
And you teach?
I teach at Hult International Business School, have done luxury marketing and other leadership and management courses. And
Hult is, for those that don't know,
Hult is headquartered in Boston, with a campus in San Francisco, Sao Paulo, London, Shanghai. We're looking at Moscow and other places.
And is Hult a person that founded it, or is it an acronym?
Mr. Hult.
There is a Mr. Hult, okay.
Yes. He ended up, I think the deal is he ended up buying the Arthur D. Little School of Management and rebranded it. So there's a link there, and I don't know exactly.
No, but that's,
But it's the largest business school in the world, and after now 6 years in operation, it's number 61 of the 1,000 or so business schools globally.
Wow. And do they have a presence in the metropolitan area? Do you know?
Actually,
New York,
they do.
Philly, and
They do.
Yeah.
They're remodeling a campus, and will have a presence here
in Manhattan or
in New York City somewhere.
interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. At some point, we should pursue that.
Yeah.
So, in your quieter moments when you're not traveling, which I know you do voraciously, and have this incredible stamina and being able to do so. And I sometimes listen to where you've been and where you're going. It's astonishing. What do you do to find your center, find a point to rest, chill out, and re-energize?
Well, some of the best resorts in the world are scattered around the Middle East, in the desert, on the beach, on islands, etc. So, and particularly through the Luxury Marketing Council, they always offer
Yeah.
fantastic rates.
Right.
So I get to take advantage of
One of the great perks of doing what we do.
It is.
What's your personal definition of luxury? If you were to say, for you, how would you define it?
And I teach this. I tell the students, luxury is a promise that you as the consumer will be taken care of, as you expect every time, and that you give up control to the brand. You just say, you give me the experience, the product, or the service that I'm looking for. And that promise is immutable for luxury brands.
And your definition of it is enjoying the fruits of that promise on the part of somebody who's
Absolutely.
providing it to you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mac. It's always a treat to be with you. Wish you lots of success. Looking forward to our Inner Circle CEO Salon Luncheon today.
Me too.
And really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Greg.
And thank you all for joining us at Conversations with Leaders in Luxury. Today with Mac McClellan, friend, President and CEO of the Luxury Marketing Council Middle East.